हेलो फ्रेंड्स, मैं डॉक्टर रफ़ीक। आज जिस बारे में मैं आपको बताने वाला हूँ वो है हार्ट फेलियर, यानी कि हार्ट फेल, जिसमें दिल बिल्कुल कमज़ोर हो जाता है और दिल काम फंक्शन पूरी तरह से नहीं कर पाता है। फ्रेंड्स, इसके बहुत कॉमन और आम प्रॉब्लम है ये हार्ट की हमारे देश में, पूरी दुनिया में। लगभग 8 करोड़ लोग इस बीमारी में मुब्तला हैं पूरे देश भर में हमारे। और ये नंबर 1 कारण है मृत्यु का, हार्ट की बीमारियां। तो उसमें से हम आज देखेंगे कि हार्ट फेलियर क्या होता है। दोस्तों, हार्ट फेलियर में दिल अपने पूरी क्षमता से, पूरी अच्छे ताकत से काम नहीं कर सकता। दिल का काम होता है कि खून को पंप करे और पूरे बॉडी को खून सप्लाई करे। तो जब उसके पंपिंग पावर में, यानी कि उसकी ताकत में, या जिसे हम बोलेंगे मेडिकल लैंग्वेज में इजेक्शन फ्रैक्शन में जब कमी आ जाती है, तो उसकी वजह से पेशेंट को काफ़ी तकलीफ़ें और काफ़ी प्रॉब्लम का सामना करना पड़ता है। इसके अलग अलग वजूहत है। जब हम बात करेंगे इसके वजूहत की, तो उसमें से नंबर 1 पर आता है हाई ब्लड प्रेशर, यानी कि उच्च रक्तचाप या उच्च रक्तदाब। दूसरी नंबर पर आता है कोरोनरी आर्टरी डिजीज, यानी कि दिल की रगों में ब्लॉकेजेस। जैसे कि आप यहाँ देख सकते हैं, आमतौर पे ये दिल की जो रगें हैं ये पूरी 100% ये ओपन होती है, इसमें ब्लॉकेजेस नहीं होते हैं। जब इसमें कोलेस्ट्रॉल की मात्रा अधिक हो जाती है और खून की चर्बी वगैरह, चिकना वगैरह जम जाता है, इसमें से ब्लॉकेजेस तैयार हो जाते हैं कुछ इस प्रकार के। और जब ये पूरा बंद हो जाता है तो ये जो है कंप्लीट ये खून के प्रवास को बंद कर देता है, जिसकी वजह से हार्ट अटैक यानी कि दिल का दौरा पड़ता है। तो दोस्तों, ये भी एक वजह है हार्ट फेलियर की। इसके अलावा कुछ हार्ट के मसल्स के प्रॉब्लम्स है, जिसे हम कार्डियोमायोपैथी कहेंगे, या कुछ हार्ट के वॉल्स के प्रॉब्लम है, रूमेटिक हार्ट डिजीजेस, या बचपन से पैदाइश से कुछ कंजेनाइटल हार्ट डिसऑर्डर्स जिसे कहते हैं, वो बीमारियां हैं। इसकी वजह से ये हार्ट फेलियर होता है। तो दोस्तों, आज इसके बारे में हमारे जो है मैंने इस पर एक टॉक किया है इंग्लिश में, वो आप देखिए, उसे अपने दोस्तों को फॉरवर्ड कीजिए। उसमें पूरी जानकारी है हार्ट फेलियर के बारे में, कि ये क्यों होता है, इसके लक्षण क्या है, इसके कॉम्प्लिकेशंस क्या है, और इसको कैसे रोका जाए, और इसका ट्रीटमेंट क्या है, और इसकी अपनी क्वालिटी, यानी कि अपनी क्वालिटी ऑफ लाइफ को, मेयार ज़िंदगी को कैसा अच्छे से अच्छा रखें इस बीमारी को साथ में रखते हुए। तो दोस्तों, मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा कि आप ये मेरा टॉक ज़रूर देखिए। थैंक यू वेरी मच।
Topic for today's webinar is heart failure, its causes, diagnosis and management. We know cardiac problems are very common throughout the globe, and if you see the data, cardiac disorders are the #1 cause of death on the planet Earth, of various modalities of cardiac disorders. One of them is heart failure. We are today talking about that. So this is the hospital where I am practicing. This is the cabin where I am sitting and conducting this meeting, this place. So as per the American College of Cardiology, it has defined cardiac failure as a complex clinical syndrome resulting from structural or functional cardiac disorders, which impairs the ability of the ventricles to fill with or eject the blood. And most of these patients suffering from the cardiac failure, they have symptoms due to impaired myocardial function. In other simple words, it can be defined as a state or a situation where the heart cannot meet the body's metabolic demands. Now we'll try to see what happens with the structure of the heart during the course of failure. This is a picture cross section of the heart. You can see right ventricle and left ventricle, right ventricular wall, interventricular septum, RV chamber, LV chamber. We are all aware of this. Here you can see hypertrophied heart. On the left side is a normal heart. This is mainly a concentric hypertrophy which has taken place due to long-standing hypertension, and it is a cause for diastolic heart failure. Now we'll see how does this diastolic heart failure develops. Actually, what happens because of this increased muscle mass, contractions are very powerful, but during the relaxation there is no cavity inside, so there is a diastolic failure most of the time in left ventricular type of hypertrophy. Mainly it is because of the hypertension. So long-standing hypertension, friends, ultimately leads to heart failure, and in these heart failure patients, hypertension is present usually 90% of the time prior to landing into the state of heart failure. So hypertension long-standing definitely most of the time leads to heart failure if not treated properly. We know in hypertension patients, if they have diabetes, left ventricular hypertrophy, coronary artery disease, or valvular heart disease, these disorders put them on the increased risk of developing a heart failure. Here you can see what I said earlier, just contradictory to that. This systolic dysfunction which takes place because of the volume overload. Here you can see thin ventricular walls, dilated chamber. You compare with the normal heart. This is the normal heart, RV, LV chambers, and see this diseased dilated heart. So this is mainly because of the volume overload. You get this condition in severe anemia, in congenital dilated cardiomyopathy, or in sometimes in CRF because of volume overload. So this is dilated heart. Mainly it leads to systolic dysfunction. We get very low ejection fraction, mainly because it doesn't have the muscles to pump the blood. Just opposite to what I had earlier said. Coming down to the reasons behind the development of cardiac failure, mainly if you see in globally, there are 5 to 6 main causes of heart failure commonly encountered. Amongst them, coronary artery disease tops the list on this planet. Second, followed by is hypertension, then coronary valvular heart disease, diabetes, obesity, old age, smoking, etc. And if you see less common causes which are seen, they include genetic disorders like hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, dilated cardiomyopathy, certain inflammatory disorders, certain collagen vascular disorders, some infiltrative myopathies like amyloidosis or hemochromatosis, certain malignancies, some neuromuscular disorders, endomyocardial disease. They constitute approximately 5 to less than 5% causes of heart failure. Most commonly, we get in our clinical practices coronary artery disease, hypertension, valvular heart disease is also nowadays very common. Diabetes, definitely. So these are the 3 to 4 main causes of heart failure. Same thing depicted here graphically, comorbidities seen in the patient of cardiac failure. If you see a slight difference between men and females, 40% majority of the cardiac failure patient, they have comorbid condition as a combination of hypertension and coronary artery disease. 90% coronary artery disease and 30% hypertension. On the contrary, in women, the contribution made by the coronary artery disease is less. So it is clear that coronary artery disease is common in males as compared to females. But if you see the combination of hypertension and CAT contributing to cardiac failure, so it is almost equal in both the sexes. Very nice slide. Friends, if you see the 5-year survival rate among the various chronic illnesses in male as well as females, you will see in women the 5-year survival rate with breast cancer is approximately around 70%. With myocardial infarction, it is around 60%, and with bowel and ovarian, respectively 50 and 45%. With the heart failure, it is approximately 30%, 5-year survival rate, and it is worst with the lung cancer, is around only 5%. Similarly, in men's, myocardial infarction around 60%, then bladder cancer, prostate cancer, last but one is cardiac failure, same 30% and 5% survival rate with the lung cancer. So a very significant mortality is there because of cardiac failure if not treated properly. Quality of life is very important, friends, whenever you deal with any chronic illness. In this, you can see very nicely shown how cardiac failure patients, they have a very poor quality of life. quality of life here is measured in terms of 7 parameters like physical functioning or bodily pain, general health, vitality, social functioning, and role physical, then role emotional and mental health. These all friends, they decide the one's mental status, or we can say mental health. So here it is compared, cardiac failure patients quality of life is compared with other illnesses like hepatitis C, chronic failure, and depression. And here on the top you can see in purple color, this is the normal person's quality of life based on these 6 to 7 parameters. So significant reduction in the quality of life in these initial 3 to 4 parameters, particularly physical functioning and role physical and bodily pain and general health. So very disabling condition, compromising in various aspects of life. Now coming down to what happens whenever there is myocardial injury, what kind of vascular responses they get initiated. So suppose individual has myocardial infarction or myocardial ischemia, LV dysfunction takes place and body responds in two manners. Vasoconstricting system gets activated as well as vasodilating on the opposite side. So here you can see with increasing in the what happens with the activation of vasoconstricting system is that sympathetic nervous system gets activated, and which ultimately you will see in future slides, RAS system and aldosterone also gets activated simultaneously, vasopressin and endothelin. They all are triggered and all are started and all are stimulated. On the contrary, there are counterbalancing systems. Some vasodilatory systems are there, which includes natriuretic peptide systems, kallikrein kinase systems, and vasodilator prostaglandin system and nitric oxide system. So usually in normal health, friend, there is a balance between this vasoconstricting and vasodilating system. So whenever there is myocardial injury, this sympathetic nervous system or vasoconstricting system takes upper hand. We'll see in future slides. What happens with increased sympathetic tone? When it is chronically increased, then it's locally it affects heart as well as systemically. Both leads to systemic leads to activation of sympathetic autonomic nervous system, and locally it leads to increased release of noradrenaline. We can call it as a cardiac spillover. So here also increased plasma concentration of norepinephrine is seen with activated sympathetic nervous system. Both the systems, local as well as system, increase the norepinephrine. So chronically increased sympathetic activity is bad for the health. We always say stress is always dangerous. This is because of this only. It causes chronically. Whenever we had any stress in the form of mental stress or physical stress, whenever there is increased sympathetic activity, always there is going to be increased morbidity and mortality. So what happens with this increased noradrenaline is that beta receptors present, they get desensitized, and there is abnormal beta receptor transduction, which leads to cardiac arrhythmias. And norepinephrine has direct toxic effect on myocardium, and myocardial reserve gets reduced, and it leads to progression of heart failure, ultimately to necrosis and increased cell apoptosis. So my friends, increased adrenergic activity or increased sympathetic activity is never a good thing to favor with. Again, what I said earlier, chronically increased adrenergic activity has shown decreased survival in patients with having increased noradrenaline levels. Again, it has got deleterious effects on various organs. Here you can see interplay between sympathetic nervous system and renin-angiotensin system. Sympathetic overactivity affects kidney mainly, causes increased tubular reabsorption of sodium, causes activation of RAS, increased vascular resistance gets increased, and there is decreased response to natriuretic factors. These natriuretic factors are bodily defense mechanisms against development of edematous status or failure status. So they get reduced because of this increased sympathetic activity of the sympathetic nervous system overactivity. Similarly, on the blood vessels, it has got the effect of causing neurogenic vasoconstriction and vascular hypertrophy. Again, not a good thing to favor with. Here in this slide, you can see the vicious cycle, how the increased sympathetic activity damages the heart. With increased sympathetic activity, you have increased level of noradrenaline, angiotensin 2, wall stress, and oxidative stress. They cause myocyte hypertrophy, altered calcium handling, altered interstitial matrix, and myocyte death ultimately. Amongst all these four, myocyte hypertrophy and altered calcium handling causes ventricular enlargement. So this is the reason why those individuals with hypertension having increased sensitive sympathetic nervous system activity have ventricular enlargement, whereas interstitial matrix alteration and myocyte death leads to systolic diastolic dysfunction. Ultimately, these two, that is ventricular enlargement and systolic dysfunction, increases stress wall of the myocardium. Again, that stimulates other remodeling stimuli. This cycle goes on, so it creates a sort of vicious cycle. So one has to break this cycle. Now we'll see what kinds of hypertrophies are there which takes place in the heart. There are two types of hypertrophies. Here you can see normal heart. Here there is concentric hypertrophy. Here they have shown eccentric hypertrophy. Concentric hypertrophy you get in a pressure overload type of pattern, or any disease which causes pressure overload, like increased systolic blood pressure. So what happens with increased systolic blood pressure? There is addition of parallel new myofibrils. They get added to the myocardium, and wall thickening takes place, and ultimately there is increase in the wall thickness and concentric hypertrophy encroaching the ventricular cavity. Whereas on the contrary, in pressure and the volume overload type, you get eccentric hypertrophy chamber dilatation, mainly because of the serial addition of the sarcomeres, which causes wall dilatation, ultimately causing chamber enlargement. Here you can see normal heart, the pressure overload type of pattern, cavity is reduced. Here is volume overload, dilated heart, a slightly thickened wall, but cavity is dilated. So both are not good for the health. Now coming down to clinical features of heart failure. Based on the ejection fraction, heart failure can be divided into heart failure with preserved ejection fraction and heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. HFrEF and HFpEF in short form you can tell. So clinical manifestations are more or less same in both. Definitely with heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, mortality is high, as high as 35%, as compared to heart failure with preserved ejection fraction around 23%. So heart failure with reduced ejection fraction is always definitely going to be bad for the health as against HFpEF. Based on the symptoms primarily, the diagnosis of heart failure can be made, and there are certain investigations for the diagnosis. Though whenever an individual of heart failure comes, heart failure patient will mainly have symptoms in the form of cough, breathlessness, tiredness, and swelling of the body, mainly of the dependent parts. So this breathlessness and cough is mainly because of the weak pumping action of the heart, pleural effusion, and pulmonary edema. Whereas swelling is mainly because of the fluid retention. So these are the most commonly presenting symptoms when the patient comes with this in our cabin or consults a cardiologist or physician. How do we diagnose heart failure? Diagnosis of the heart failure can be done clinically, as well as you have to take the help of certain investigations. So clinically, one has to keep a very high index of suspicion when an individual has these factors like old age, hypertension, diabetes, CAD, EMI, and he is having the symptoms of cardiac failure, which just I said. Along with that, on physical examination, he will have resting tachycardia, low pulse pressure, cold extremities. On auscultation, there will be basal rails and peripheral edema, raised JUP. So these all will be the signs. So if you see the investigations which has to be done in these patients, they can be divided into hematological investigations and ECG and radiological investigations. ECG will show you whether there is chamber enlargement is there or not, whether there are any evidence of ischemia is there or not, or whether there is any valvular problem is there or not. So ECG is very useful. Second thing is 2D echocardiography. With the help of 2D echocardiography, you will come to know what is the status of the ejection fraction How about the size of the walls? How are the pressure gradients across the wall? Then chest X-ray. Chest X-ray, you will be able to see if there is a pleural effusion bilaterally, or if there is cardiomegaly, or there is increased haziness in the paracardiac region. One important blood investigation, that is NT-proB type molecule, which is released by the cardiac myocyte, which is in response to stretching, which gets released. That also is very significant when you diagnose this condition. So based on the ejection fraction, this cardiac failure can be divided into heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, heart failure with intermediate ejection fraction, and heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. Normally, in normal individual, the ejection fraction is between 70 to 75. Those with preserved ejection fraction will have EF above 50, and those with intermediate ejection fraction, they will have EF between 40 to 49. And those individuals with EF less than 40, they will be labeled as HFrEF, or heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. Very important slide on the basis of New York Heart Association. How will you classify heart failure patients? So NYHA class 1 includes only high risk patients. There are no symptoms and there are no limitation on physical activity. NYHA class 2, they are comfortable when resting, but ordinary physical activity like climbing stairs or lifting utensils or routine weights or groceries can make them symptomatic. So there is slight limitation on physical activity. What happens in NYHA class 3, they are comfortable, they are also comfortable with resting, but very ordinary activities like taking a shower or combing or just doing routine shaving and all makes them symptomatic. There is marked limitation of physical activity in the patients, those belonging to NYHA class 3. And in NYHA class 4, patient is totally severely symptomatic. Their symptoms are present even at rest, and they cannot perform any kind of activity. So we can see severity increases as the class increases, and there is symptomatic improvement with the treatment. So this was all heart failure classification as per the NYHA grading system. Coming down to the management goals, whenever you are dealing with a patient of cardiac failure, you should keep in mind, you should have 4 goals. You should be able to reduce the symptoms, improve the quality of the life, and decrease the rate of hospitalization and reduce the mortalities. These goals were recommended by ACC AHA 2013 meeting, ESC 2016 meeting, 2010 heart failure HFSA guidelines, and 2010 NICE guidelines respectively. So your aim should be first to reduce all the troubles, symptoms of the patient and make him better in his quality of life, and try to manage him on the OPD basis, reduce his hospitalization rate, and ultimately try to reduce his mortality. So when you see the components of heart failure therapy, they can be divided into 3. First is the correction of underlying factor. Second is lifestyle modification, and third one is specific targeted treatment. These patients may have underlying hypertension, coronary artery disease, or thyroid problem, renovascular disorders, diabetes, COPD. They needs to be given due respect and attention. They needs to be treated. They needs to be corrected. Unless you treat the underlying factors, you won't be able to achieve the victory over the treatment of the heart failure. Then definitely lifestyle modification, they have great impact. Smoking cessation, alcohol moderation, salt intake reduction less than 3 grams, fluids intake between 1.5 to 2 liter, and optimum maintenance of weight. Coming down to specific targeted therapy, they include gold standard diuretics, ACE, ARB or ARNI, beta blockers, and aldosterone antagonists. We will see in details about all in our future slides. So one more staging of heart failure is given. Stage A is called when a person is said to be in stage A when he is a high risk individual like diabetic patient or hypertensive or atherosclerotic coronary disease, but without any structural problem, without any symptoms. So he will be labeled as a stage A person, stage A heart failure person. The stage B heart failure patient will have structural heart disease, but he will be asymptomatic. There will not be any signs or symptoms of the disease. In stage C, both the things will be present, symptoms as well as diseased heart. Stage D is refractory heart failure. Coming down to drug classes, which are the novel drugs which are available as on today for managing these sort of patients. We have ACE group, which includes enalapril, lisinopril, and ramipril. ARBs like losartan, telmisartan, olmesartan. Aldosterone antagonists like eplerenone, spironolactone can be included. Beta blockers like metoprolol, carvedilol. Diuretics, furosemide, torsemide, and hydrochlorothiazide. And in miscellaneous other groups, digoxin and amiodarone. So now we'll see each and individual drugs trials. When you see the trials taken with the enalapril maleate, so there are mainly 3 or 4 trials. First trial is consensus trial, that is cooperative North Scandinavian enalapril survival study, which was conducted over 253 patients belonging to class 4 NYHA. Among that, 70% patients were having CAD. So there was 27% total mortality and 50% progressive heart failure mortality. So improvement was seen in overall symptomatic nature, as well as reduction in hospitalization was also observed. And another study performed with enalapril was study on LV dysfunctions, which was it was a big trial which was conducted on 2,569 enalapril versus placebo. Here mean LVF was 25% and class 2, class 3 NYHA patients included. They got 16% all-cause mortality and 22% progressive heart failure mortality. Other benefits were reduction in hospitalization rate and symptomatic improvement. Another third trial, last trial with enalapril maleate was vasodilators heart failure trial 2, in which enalapril was compared with hydrochlorothiazide plus isosorbate dinitrate. In that also, enalapril has shown beneficial results. Mortality reduction was seen. When you see the trials conducted with the ramipril, again there are 3 trials. IR trials, which is acute infarction ramipril evaluation, in which they observed 27% all-cause mortality. All the patients were myocardial infarction, 100% patients, and lower rate of progression to cardiac failure was seen. And another trial conducted with trandelapril study was conducted against placebo, and again it was on myocardial infarction patients. They got 29% reduction in progression of heart failure. HOPE trial, it was a landmark study, very important study which was conducted with ramipril. We get so many time references of this HOPE study, that is heart outcome study with prevention, heart outcome prevention evaluation. In this, they included only high-risk individuals but without heart failure. See here, it is very important, only high-risk individuals without heart failure. And with the ramipril treatment, they have found that ramipril has reduced the atherosclerotic progression and progression to heart failure. So ramipril has shown its effect in the patients of high-risk patient category patient in preventing them from landing into cardiac failure in future. There are 2 trials conducted with angiotensin receptor blockers. One is ELITE trial, that is evaluation of losartan evaluation. So here also they have seen improvement and 32% death hospitalization and 46% progressive heart failure mortality. Second trial was valsartan heart failure trial. Again, it has shown significant positive results with angiotensin receptor blockers. And third study was optimal study, which was conducted with losartan against captopril. When you come down to beta blocker trials, so first trial was metoprolol trial in dilated cardiomyopathy. So it was conducted on 383 patients belonging to class 2, class 3 NYHA with ejection fraction of 22%. There was 34% death mortality reduction, and there was decreased hospitalization and increase in the LVEF. So metoprolol was found to be useful in dilated cardiomyopathy. Another trial was with bisoprolol. The name was cardiac insufficiency bisoprolol trial. It was tested against placebo. Again, it has shown improvement in terms of morbidity and mortality. Third trial was conducted with carvedilol, US carvedilol trial. So again, same in the same fashion, it has shown benefits. If you see the diuretics trials, RAILS trial and FSS trial, these are the two trials. The Ramipril evaluation study and eplerenone heart evaluation study, survey study. These both the trials, spironolactone as well as eplerenone, they have shown improvement in class failure, NYHA class failure status. I will not go into the details, but they have shown improvement in all the aspects. Other trials they were conducted with digoxin and amiodarone. Amiodarone is an antiarrhythmic drug, as all of you know. Digoxin study was conducted over 6,800 patients. It was a big trial, and but unfortunately in this trial they have shown no change in mortality rates. The Jessica trial, it was Argentinian trial conducted with antiarrhythmic amiodarone drug. It has shown favorable results, reduction in the progression of heart failure. CHF stat was another trial with amiodarone. This trial also has shown reduction in the arrhythmias, and last EMAT trial was also done with amiodarone, in which 35% sudden death reduction was shown, and favorable results were shown of amiodarone in the patients of cardiac failure. So to summarize, my dear colleagues, when you see all the, when you summarize all the trials, almost all the drugs, AC inhibitors, beta blockers, ARB, aldosterone antagonists, digoxin, and loop diuretics, they all more or less they improve the symptoms and they reduce the hospitalization and worsening of the heart failure, and they have all decreased the mortality due to cardiac failure, except the CCB, which has worsened the symptoms of heart failure. Inotropic agents, they were of plus minus effect value, and CCB and inotropic agents were not showing any concrete positive results. Usually we avoid CCB in cardiac failure patients. Actually, they are contraindicated, we can say. Now, recently a new concept has been introduced, that is neprilysin inhibition in heart failure in few years back. Neprilysin is an enzyme which is widely distributed in the body. Mainly its concentration is found in the kidney, and it degrades some other important hormones which help in maintaining the normal physiology of the body. So inhibition of neprilysin was thought so as to achieve the benefit. So, but in effect, its inhibition was ineffective due to angiotensin potentiation. So neprilysin was combined with AC inhibitor, but it had the risk of angioedema. So neprilysin was combined with ARB. So we called it as ARNI, that is angiotensin receptor and neprilysin inhibitor. Neprilysin inhibitor is a sacubitril. So sacubitril and ARB we use valsartan. Sacubitril and valsartan combination we use for inhibiting the neprilysin. Very landmark and very important study, paradigm study, heart failure trial was conducted, which compared the ARNI with enalapril. So in this study, they designed mainly to replace the current use of AC inhibitors and ARBs. Nowadays previously considered as a cornerstone on the treatment of heart failure, to be replaced with ARNI. So what the results they got in paradigm heart failure trial, we can see. They conduct this study in this manner. For the first 2 weeks, they are given enalapril 10 mg BID. Then ARNI was given 100 mg BD for first 2 weeks. Then from second onwards up to 4 weeks, 200 mg BD dose was increased. So enalapril dose was above 18.4 mg. So after that, double-blind period started, in which this molecule Ernie was compared with enalapril head-to-head. 1:1 randomization was done, and you can clearly see the mortality was much less with Ernie group and as against plain enalapril. So it has clearly shown that Ernie group, that is angiotensin receptor blocker with neprilysin inhibitor, is always superior than plain AC inhibitor. Along with that, along with mortality, it has also shown some beneficial effects of this combination, like this sacubitril valsartan combination has reduced the risk of heart failure hospitalization by 21%. Improvement was seen in the symptoms, and reduction in the physical activity was also seen. Also, this Ernie was better tolerated than enalapril alone in terms of side effects like cough, hyperkalemia, renal impairment, or other adverse effects like angioedema. More hypotension was seen with sacubitril valsartan group, but there was no increase in any discontinuation in the study. So this combination is always superior to single drug. We'll change the topic. We'll come down to ivabradine. What is ivabradine? Now we'll see. Friends, having an elevated heart rate is not at all a good idea. It has been shown by various studies that elevated heart rate predisposes to so many cardiovascular risk factors like atherosclerosis, plaque disruption, and one study which was conducted, it was published in JAMA, that survivors of AMI, those who had heart rate of more than 70, they had increase in death rates. So increased heart rate significantly contributed. Baseline increased heart rate is always not favorable. It was also shown in the Framingham study, where progressive increase in all-cause mortality, all-cause cardiovascular mortality morbidity was seen with increased heart rate. Those patients who had cardiac transplants, those after post-transplant, if they have more than 100 heart rate, they had worse outcomes as against those having normal heart rate. So we can say that always we should try to keep the heart rate between 60 to 70. Having up to 75, we can say it's not good to have a heart rate above 75. We had this wonderful drug beta blocker with us to control the heart rate. It has got its own certain disadvantages. Beta blocker, reduces, it causes bronchoconstriction, reduces insulin sensitivity, increases AV delay, conduction delays. So can't be given to every left and right patient. We have to think twice before prescribing this drug. In addition, it causes weight gain, depression, fatigue, erectile dysfunction like side effects. And when we want to achieve target heart rate of less than 70, you have to give the beta blocker dose, which may not be tolerated well by the patient. So beta blocker we have got, but it has got its own limitations. So recently, few years back, ivabradine was launched. It is a Hessian, that is hyperpolarized cyclic nucleotide channel blocker, which acts on the cardiac pacemaker tissue and inhibits the IF current. So by that, it reduces the heart rate without any causing effect on the ventricular repolarization or myocardial contractility. So partially we can say it is metabolically neutral. That only aspect, it only reduces heart rate. Otherwise, it doesn't interfere with blood pressure or any kind of other hemodynamic parameters. And efficacy of this ivabradine is totally dependent on the baseline individual's heart rate. If individual has already baseline higher heart rate, ivabradine may not be that effective. So this is the point with ivabradine. As I said, it specifically binds to the IF funny channel, and this is the prolongs the diastolic duration. Important thing I would like to mention, it does not alter ventricular repolarization, does not alter myocardial contractility, and does not have any effect on blood pressure. So these cardiac failure patients, they are already hemodynamically in a compromised state. So we want a neutral cardiac drug which can provide the benefit without hampering or without altering any hemodynamic status. So ivabradine partially fulfills those criteria. Here you can see SA node action potential, which is prolonged by this drug brand name Porlanor, Avabradine brand. With this causing reduction in the heart rate. What guidelines say? Most of the our guidelines are governed by Western countries. HFSA, that is Heart Failure Society of America, ACC, American College of Cardiology, and American Heart Association. What is their take? What is their say about the management of heart failure? What does this ACC, AHA, and HFSA they recommend? Whenever you encounter a case of heart failure means we will consider heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, of course. You assess the volume first and initiate guideline-directed management and therapy. And if the individual belongs to stage C or class between NYHA class 1 and 4, it's straightforward to start him with AC or ARB inhibitor and beta blocker if the blood pressure permits, and diuretics if the fluid overload is there. There are 2 to 3 different scenarios. If the creatinine clearance is more than 30 ml per minute and potassium less than 5, you can consider aldosterone antagonist like eplerenone. Class of recommendation is 1. And for this also AC, ARB and beta blocker and diuretic, class of recommendation is level 1. So strongly the societies are recommending these drugs. If the individual, in the scenario 2, where the individual has blood pressure, adequate blood pressure, and there is no contraindication to ARB or sacubitril, so straightforward he can be started with ARNI, that is which I said earlier, angiotensin receptor neprilysin inhibitor. Class of recommendation level 1, so they decrease mortality both. Third scenario, with optimum dose of beta blocker, if the heart rate is above 70, one can go for ivabradine, but the class of recommendation is 2A with ivabradine. So these were the guidelines given by the ACCH and HFSA regarding the management of heart failure. Now what is the take of European Society? We will see now. Heart failure management as guidelines given by ESC meeting 2017. According to them, diuretics should be the part of every patient if they are fluid overloaded, to relieve the symptoms of congestion. Then again, therapy should be started with angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitor and a beta blocker, and dose should be gradually up titrated till the patient tolerates. If the patient doesn't respond to this and still he is symptomatic, you can add mineral receptor antagonist. Again, up titrate the dose to maximum tolerated doses. Most of the patients they respond. If unfortunately if any patient doesn't respond, then you have 3 options. If the patient is able to tolerate ACE or ERB, you can directly put him on ARNI if the blood pressure is above 100, and you can straightforward start angiotensin receptor neprilysin inhibitor. The class of recommendation is class of recommendation is 1 for ARNI to replace AC inhibitor. Very important. And if the sinus rhythm QRS duration is more than 130 milliseconds, so he may be considered and evaluated for cardiac resynchronization therapy. But here the level of recommendation is not 1, it is 2. If the sinus rhythm is more than 70, with optimum beta blocker use, ivabradine use can be considered here. So my respected colleagues, first you should begin as per the guidelines of ESC 2016, AC inhibitor with beta blocker. If patient is symptomatic, add MR antagonist. If his response, well and good. If doesn't respond, shift him to ARNI if the blood pressure responds, blood pressure permits. Or C for the sinus rhythm, SOS he may need CRT, or if C for the pulse rate, SOS he may need ivabradine, and he may get benefit. Those patients who responds, as I said, no further there is any need to add anything, and you can reduce gradually dose of diuretics and other drugs. So based on the NYHA class A, if you see the role of different drugs, so in all the patients very safely you can use AC, ARB and ARNI and beta blocker also. But aldosterone and blockers, they are kept reserved for moderate to severe heart failure, where eGFR is more than 30 and potassium less than 5. And diuretics are reserved only if the signs of fluid retention is present. It's NYHA 2 onwards. So here these 4 drugs, class of drugs as per the NYHA, they have shown in this slide. Same thing is depicted in a different table format. As per the ongoing NYHA class symptoms, initially you can consider AC ARB inhibitor, ARB. If the patient is intolerant, then put him on ARNI, beta blocker. If there is no response, mineralocorticoid receptor antagonist can be tried based on QRS, either intracardiac defibrillator or cardiac resynchronization therapy pacemaker or cardiac resynchronization therapy defibrillator can be considered. So level of recommendation is, class of recommendation is 1. Here then you have the option of adding iloviradine, digoxin, hydralazine as sorbate dinitrate. So in green they have shown these drugs, they improve mortality plus minus morbidity. Those in yellow drugs, they improve only morbidity. There is no effect on morbidity. So only, and then finally in terminally ill and end stage heart failure, you don't have any other option just to go for left ventricular assist device or heart transplantation. This is the only answer for the refractory heart failure or end stage heart failure. In this slide, in this photo, you can see this, just for discussion I put this photo. This lady's son has died due to some problem. His heart was healthy, and this lady's heart was transplanted to this fellow who was having severe refractory heart failure. See the facial expression of this lady auscultating as if she's auscultating her own son. So with this, I finish my talk. My take-home message for the audience is just cardiovascular diseases are very common in our country. 30% of the mortality, if you see, they are because of the cardiovascular disorders. We have around 8 crore patients suffering from cardiac illnesses of various kinds in our country. So every physician, every cardiologist should be very careful in tackling them, and one of the disease of belonging to cardiovascular heart failure I just tried to discuss in today's meeting. So day after tomorrow we have World Heart Day. I think this is the right time to speak on this topic, isn't it, Mr. Yadav? Are you there?
Sir, I am there, yes, Kiran.
After tomorrow is the World Heart Day, and I am very much thankful to you for giving me opportunity to speak on this cardiac topic. Thank you very much. Thank you for patient listening. Thank you very much.